Hi guys, I'm Sarah from Sourdough for Beginners. Some of you might have watched the live that I did this morning. If you didn't, you can just scroll down one underneath this video and it's there. But this morning what I did was I mixed up a batch a couple of hours before I went live. And I had that batch ready to do its final stretch and fold and get into the bulk proofing containers. And then I talked about the bulk proofing containers, and then I mixed up another batch while I was there. And then we ended up answering a whole bunch of questions about types of flour to use and, how they act differently and all of the different things that could happen. I wanted to just pop back on live now to talk about the importance of the bulk proofing process, what you're looking for, and how things can go depending on your circumstances. So a lot of times we'll see someone be like, well, like I put my dough on the counter overnight and now this morning it's really sticky. Your bulk proofing really only should take between 4 and 8 hours. If your house is really cold, it might take 8 hours. If your house is really warm, it might take four. But other things are going to affect bulk proofing, including what type of flour that you use. So this loaf I mixed at 8 o'clock this morning, stretched and folded it until 10, and got it into the bulk proofing container at 10. So it's 3 now. It's been 5 hours, and this one's ready to go. So I'm going to pre-shape this and show you guys how to do pre-shaping and shaping in just a minute. I'm also going to show you how I know it's ready. But these two loaves were mixed at 10 o'clock, so 2 hours later, and I was done stretching and folding them by about noon, and it's 3:30, and they're pretty much nearly ready to go too. This loaf was 100% all-purpose flour, and then if you were watching my live this morning, I ran out of all-purpose flour, so these loaves were about 50% all-purpose and 50% whole wheat. So people are always asking us, well, do you have a recipe for whole wheat? In most cases, you can substitute any flour you like into any recipe, especially if you understand how the different flours work. Whole wheat recipes often require a little bit more water because they soak it up faster, and whole wheat tends to rise a lot faster. So in the description of this video, there's a ton of links. All of the most popular tutorials that people use when they end up at Sourdough for Beginners end up following our page or our site. And one of them is called Bulk Proofing Success. So we teach the essential processes. What we say is that out there's lots of different ways that you can operate using sourdough, but master the essential processes, and then you'll be able to get good loaves. And then from there, you can start to add more advanced or optional processes. So a more advanced process would be a higher hydration or a higher a sturdier flour. An optional process would be cold proofing. So I'm just going to turn my camera and start working on pre-shaping. So what my plan is with these breads is I'm going to bake this one right now. My Dutch oven is in the oven preheating now as we speak. And these two are going to go into bannetons. So when we're bulk proofing for baking on the same day, we definitely want the dough to double all the way. When we're bulk proofing to go into bannetons, we want to look for about 75%. So earlier today when I put my dough in, I marked the height of the dough. So you can see by this green line that the dough was touching on the side here, on the side here, there were some voids in it. But if you look here on this end, there's no line and it ends way back here, right? So even on this side, right? It ended way back here. So the dough was like that far away from the edge of the thing. So when you look at this line, it doesn't look like the dough is doubled, right? When you look at this line here, right, it doesn't necessarily look like it's doubled, but when you look here, it's like tripled. So when you use our bulk proofing success video and bulk proof your dough in clear straight-sided containers like this, it gives you a much more accurate view. So I would say that this dough is 100% doubled. Now with the wheat, this was mixed 2 hours later, and it's like really close to almost doubled too. It's almost a little overproofed. And what I say with cold proofing is optional. And if you messed up somewhere, especially in bulk proofing, cold proofing might just make the situation worse. So for me, in some cases, I might actually just bake this today. but I'm not going to because I'm tired and I've been doing chores all day. So I'm going to bake this one, and I'm going to get these ones into the Banneton, and then I'll show you my starters from this morning, what they've done, and I'm basically just going to let you guys hang out with me while I get through this. So first things first, let's pre-shape this dough and start getting it ready for the oven. So pre-shaping can actually sometimes save an overproofed dough. So this dough is like nice and puffy, right? So I'm just going to dump this dough out onto the counter. No flour, no water. And you'll see when it comes out that it's quite sticky. It's kind of messy, right? So one of the really common things that we see people say is, I couldn't work with my dough, it was too sticky. See how it's like sticking to my hands? Well, pre-shaping is going to start building some tension into your dough. And just like everything else, in the description of this video, there is a link that says pre-shaping. So what we suggest is that you pre-shape your dough, let it rest for a little while, and then put the final shape on it. So what I'll do during this video is I'll get this one pre-shaped, I'll get the other ones pre-shaped, I'll chat a bit, and then I'll shape this and stick it in the oven, and we'll wrap up. In the meantime, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. I'll try and keep an eye on the video. But if you were just watching my dough, when it first came out, it was super sticky, it was super messy, right? Normally for pre-shaping, you would use a bench scraper, so it's like square like this. It's got like a handle on top. There's one listed in my list of Amazon stuff that you could shop for in the description of the video. And I have one, I ordered one, but I like the handle on this knife. This is like really dull. It hasn't been sharpened in forever, so I just use this for pre-shaping. But essentially what we're doing when we pre-shape is just building tension and air into the dough. So no water, no flour, and all we're doing is sort of pushing it with one hand and sliding it and using the counter to pull against it to get it to pre-shape. Okay, so I'm just going to set this one aside, and I'm going to let it rest. And as I'm working with the other ones, you'll see it. It'll start to sort of settle, and then we'll get it shaped. So these two are going to go in the Bannetons overnight. So we'll get them pre-shaped as well. So these ones, you can see I increased the hydration on these just a little because they were whole wheat. But these bulk proofed 2 hours faster than the all-purpose flour did. And this is why we say that this method, right, even when you're experienced, bulk proofing your dough on the counter like this so that you can see what's happening is super valuable. So sticky, see? Watch, it stays on my hands, right? This would be very hard to shape. If you started trying to do your trifold like this, you'd have a very hard time. So if you take the time to pre-shape, so the order of operations for essential processes is take your active starter, mix it into a shaggy dough, let it rest for 30 minutes, stretch and fold, rest for 30 minutes and stretch and fold. Repeat the stretching and folding 4 times. Then get your dough into bulk proofing containers. Let them bulk proof on the counter at a time when you can pay attention to them for somewhere between 4 and 8 hours. Then dump them out of their bulk proofing containers, pre-shape them, let them rest for 20, 30, 40 minutes, and then put the final shape on them. And I don't know if you can see this one in the background, but it's starting to settle, right? So with this one, I'm just going to build some good tension. So I'm pushing with my one hand. All I'm doing with the bench scraper is kind of folding it underneath itself. So all we're doing is forcing this dough sort of underneath itself to get some air into it, right? And if your dough was really sticky, sometimes this can save it. And I'll show you what I mean. You watched me with this dough at the beginning, mash my fingers into it, and it was sticking. Like, look, not sticky at all anymore. So pre-shaping can really help us to get to a point where we can manage dough, even if it's a little bit overproofed, right? Now, sometimes things are just so overproofed that there's no saving them, and I mean, you can avoid having your dough be so overproofed that there's no saving it by using the bulk proofing success method. And that's why I decided to come back on live today. So if you've just joined, I did a live this morning. It's going to be, if you go on to the Facebook page, it'll be right underneath this one. And I had a dough already mixed up that was in its last stretch and fold phase and got that into bulk proofing containers. And then I mixed a new dough. We refed the starter and people asked tons of questions. We got tons of questions answered. And that was kind of where I had planned to leave it for the day. And I said at the end of the video that I was going to bake the first loaf, the all-purpose loaf, and that these two 50% whole wheat loaves were going to go into the fridge in bannetons, and I'd bake them probably bake one loaf tomorrow and one loaf on Tuesday. But then I was just sitting here and I decided to come in and look at my first dough to try and figure out when I would be starting to bake, and realized that all three of them, even though the whole wheat ones were made 2 hours later, were at the same bulk proofing level. So I thought, you know what, this is going to be a really good opportunity to get on and do a live so that people can understand. Okay, so I now have all three doughs pre-shaped, right? They've got this nice smooth skin on them. I've built tons of tension into them, right? They've got nice, good air. So I'm just going to let them rest for a minute, and then I'll get this all-purpose one shaped. I'll get it stuck in the oven. So my Dutch oven is preheating. Wanda says hello. Hi, Wanda. So we'll get this into the oven, and then I'll get these two into the bannetons and prepped. I did mention that while I was doing my live this morning, I ran out of all-purpose flour. So I'm going to use what tiny little bit of rice flour I have left to line my bannetons with. And I'm going to use just some whole wheat flour to get the all-purpose prepped in the oven today. Wanda says, I'm on day 7 of doing a starter. It did the quick rise on day 3, but nothing since. Any suggestions? Yes, keep discarding and feeding. In the description of this video, there's links to a full day-by-day starter tutorial, as well as a common starter questions tutorial. Give that a quick review. There might be some little adjustments you can make in there, but usually around day 7, it's still common not to be activated. It should activate soon. Devin says, I think I'm struggling with bulk proofing. Can you possibly show on your container how much bigger it should get? Mine increased 3 times, but I'm thinking that was not right. Devin, if it increased 3 times, that's way too much. It's overproof. So here is my container, and you can see where my lines were, right? So this one, it wasn't touching at the end. So wherever I wrote a green line, so this one you can see it sort of cut off here, and this whole end of the bulk proofing container was a void. And by the time I took it out, the dough was only just up here, just over this line that's naturally on here. But what I knew, because I had marked the bulk proofing containers and showed where the dough ended, what I knew was that the dough had expanded outward and upward. You're looking for your dough to double if you're going to bake it same day, or rise to about 75% if you're going to cold proof it. Wanda says, okay, thanks. I've looked at your videos. Yeah, I think there's lots of good stuff in there. And after this live, I always go through all of the comments and sort of re-answer everything and paste some links and everything else. So I'll take a look. But I really think on day 7, just keep discarding and feeding, and you're almost there. Sheila says, my starter is finally active, but it doesn't seem like enough to bake with. Can I do 1, 2, 2 at next feeding to increase amount? So once your starter is activated, you can make it any size you want. So you can basically feed it what you need. So if tomorrow you need 200 grams of starter, feed your starter 100 grams each of flour and water tonight, and tomorrow morning you'll have 200 grams ready to go. So speaking of starters, these are my 2 starters that I used this morning. So if you watched the live this morning, or if you're going to go back and watch it, you'll see that I had taken a huge amount out of these starters, and then I fed them 75 grams each of flour and water. This one I accidentally dumped 90 grams of flour into, and look at it, it actually rose way more than the other one. So these are now at peak, and I will mix again probably Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. So what I'm going to do is stick these in the fridge at peak. And as long as I bake within 2 or 3 days, I won't refeed them before I use them. If it goes much longer than 2 or 3 days, it's sitting in the fridge and they really start to fall a lot and start to get hooch on top, then I'll pull them out and feed them 4 to 12 hours before my next bake. Devin says, thank you. My bread definitely came out gummy because it was overproofed. I appreciate you. I appreciate you too, actually, by the way. I wouldn't be doing this if all of you guys weren't here. And I do it because it's fun, but also because, it's nice to be able to help people make things simple. So definitely try this method again and look for double or less. Okay, so these are going to go in the fridge, and because my method and how you store your starter is there's a million different ways to do it, and it's totally up to your preference. There's certain ways that work for certain types of baking. If you bake every day or more than 4 or 5 times a week, then your starter can just live on the counter and you can feed it every day. If you bake only once a week, then you might as well store your starter in the fridge. You can either put it straight in the fridge after you bake with it without feeding it, and then feed it 4 to 12 hours before you bake, or you can feed it right away after you bake with it like I do, wait for it to peak, stick it in the fridge, right? And then if you're going to only bake once a week, you'll still want to feed it 4 to 12 hours before you bake. But or if you're like me and you bake every 2 or 3 days, you can feed it right after you use it, let it peak, stick it in the fridge, and then just take it out and use it straight out of the fridge in a few days. So I'm going to get this all-purpose loaf shaped now and ready for the oven. So I'm just going to turn you back. So right at the beginning of this video, you watched me pre-shape this loaf, and it was, round and puffy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle some flour on my counter. Usually I would use all-purpose, like just regular plain white flour for this. But if you watched my live this morning, I ran out of flour, and I won't get to the grocery store till tomorrow. So my parchment paper that the bread is going to go on is floured, and my counter is floured. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my fingers underneath my pre-shaped dough. I'm going to stretch like this, and I'm going to flip it, right? And I've got it flipped. This side is sticky. The other side is not. So I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit. If I were to really stretch this a lot, it would be called laminating, but I'm just going to give it a little bit of a stretch. And at this point, I'm starting to be very gentle, right? I'm trying to not push the air out of the bread. I'm trying to trap it in. If someone is giving me a recipe that says 100 grams of levain, are they just taking about 100 grams of starter that's been fed the night before? Or should I be using 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water, and 10 grams of active starter to make 100 grams of levain? This part confuses me. Ashley, that's a fantastic question. This is why we say that beginners should consider just using the essential processes. There's reasons for a levain, which are complicated and really long to explain. But in most cases, actually, you can just feed your starter the night before and dump straight out of your starter into your bread. If you want to make a levain, then put 10 grams into a container, feed it 45 grams each of flour and water, let it rise, and then dump that whole amount into your starter. But it just seems like an extra step for me. I wouldn't bother with it. So let's see here. Okay, so we flipped our pre-shaped bread. We've got it stretched out. Now we're going to make a pamphlet. So we're going to fold the top third down and the bottom third up, right? And then we're just going to keep our hands floured. And we're going to take our ends and we're going to sort of stretch as we roll, right? So now we've got sort of a loaf shape, right? And now this is called push and pull. Again, sort of an optional step. But all I'm going to do right now is just gently work the dough a little bit to sort of get it into the shape that I want it to be. Close my ends a little here. Close this end. There we go. Get that closed. Turn it. Good. All right, so now I've got sort of a nice bowl shape, and I've got my parchment paper floured. Let me just move this out of the way. Okay, so now I'm going to set my loaf onto the parchment paper, and I'm just going to use some of this flour that I was using, and I'm going to flour the top of my bread, maybe a little more. And actually, I kind of think this whole wheat looks nice on top of the all-white loaf. Okay. And for this one, I'm just going to do a very simple score. So scoring is one of the essential processes, but only a functional score is. So all the pretty scoring that you see out there, you can definitely start practicing with that once you are making strong dough that's able to hold a score. But the only thing you really need, and you actually could go without it, but the only thing you really should give your bread is a half-inch deep, 1 centimeter deep, perpendicular to the counter score that's going to allow steam to escape. So the way sourdough works is the steam starts to build up inside and then it goes poof and bursts out. And that steam escaping is what makes the dough rise. It's called oven spring. So we want to just score our bread and help the bread have that opportunity to do oven spring. So a functional score is simply this, right? And with my functional score, I like to just go over it, right? So like a nice big score, that's where our ear is going to end up. If I want to put a little bit of decoration on, these are simply that, decoration. And they look nice, and I like them, but they're not necessary, right? So what I always tell people is if you're one of those people who wants to do those beautiful artistic scores, then perfect your dough. So my Dutch oven has been preheating in the oven. Cook times. Cook times vary. It depends on your oven. It depends on what you prefer. It depends on your recipe. But ultimately, what you're looking for is an internal temp in your bread of 205 degrees Fahrenheit. However you get there is up to you. I have a very, very weak apartment-sized stove that is a struggle to work with. I've been having to adjust recipes for basically everything since I got it. So I bake mine at 450 the whole time. I preheat my Dutch oven basically before I start pre-shaping, and I put a little bit of tinfoil in the bottom of the Dutch oven, my parchment paper on top of the tinfoil, and I believe that the tinfoil keeps the bottom of my bread a little bit softer. I also keep a tray of water underneath the Dutch oven because the bottom of my stove is very hot, so I think that also keeps the bottom of my dough a little bit softer, so I'm not sawing so hard. Candace says, I didn't have my kitchen scale handy when I started my starter. I did half a cup of flour and half a cup of water. The next day, let's just get this to open. It looked, by the way, Candace, I already know what the issue is, but I want to, there we go. It looked separated and didn't smell like hooch. I mixed, discarded, and fed it 1 cup of flour, half a cup of water. Next day, same thing. Today I finally had some activity. Today I discarded and used my scale for a 1-to-1 feed. Can I use today's discard for anything, say a pie crust? Candace, you definitely don't want to use your starter at all until it's activated. Right now it is in the fermentation process and the bacteria that's in there is pretty unstable. You need to really throw your discard away until your starter activates. But you could significantly reduce your feeding amount in order to save some waste, especially now that you've got your scale. Discard that baby all the way back to 50 grams. Feed it 50 grams each once per day. You're going to be throwing away 100 grams every day. You're going to discard back to 50 grams every day. So you will throw away 50 grams of flour, but theoretically it's only for about a week. So we're talking about maybe a cup of flour altogether. But you definitely don't want to use your discard until your starter is activated. So I'm just going to pull my Dutch oven out here. Here we go. So nice and preheated and hot. Going to stick my tinfoil in. And then I'm going to use the parchment paper that I've got my bread on as a sling and lift this loaf in. And then I'm going to get my lid back on. Sorry, I started telling you how I bake and I stopped right in the middle. I bake at 450 the whole time. I bake for 30 minutes with the lid on, and then I take the Dutch oven out, I rotate it, I take the lid off, I pop it back in for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I take the tray of water out from underneath it, which is totally optional, and then I let it cook for another 5 or 10 or however many minutes it takes until it gets to 205 degrees Fahrenheit on the inside. Candace said, okie dokie, thanks so much. You're welcome. Why do I use tinfoil? Wanda, I'll paste you a little video after this, but I think it keeps the bottom of my bread softer. So, optional process, not essential. Why do you put foil on the bottom? Just tuned in. Sorry if you already answered. No, it's okay. I have a little video that's called like, you don't need to have hard bottoms on your sourdough bread. I like to be able to just easily cut my bread. I hate the hard bottom, so I've adapted all of these ways to keep the bottom soft. So I put the tinfoil under my parchment paper. It sort of lets air circulate. And I also overkill have a tray of water underneath. Okay, so these 2 loaves are going to go in bannetons for cold proofing overnight because I do not feel like baking 3 loaves of bread today. So first things first, I'm going to use, normally I would just use all-purpose, but I ran out of flour this morning. So I'm just going to use some rice flour to dust these bannetons. So I'm just going to pile some flour in these. And I like these silicone bannetons. They're linked in the description of this video. But they just, nothing sticks to them. They work really well. I always just kind of get that dusting of flour on there. You kind of see it easier with the pink. You can use your hand to spread it around. They're flexible. They fit good in my cupboard. They seem to be holding the shape of the dough really well. I've used them 3 or 4 times now, and I really love them. I have a shaped dough in my fridge since Friday. Can I still bake it? And if so, how? Michelle, yeah, it's Sunday. They say that you can leave dough in the fridge for up to 36 hours. And while I'm talking, I'm just going to start shaping this loaf here. So same process as last time. So it hasn't really been much more than 36 hours since you put your dough in. I would say just do it the same way you would always do it. So get some parchment paper, tip your shaped dough out, flour it, score it, put it in the oven. If it seems like it's not holding its shape, like it's falling, you might need to give it a fresh shape. So pre-shape it and then reshape it again, and that might help it. Another trick is what we call a hot score. So if your dough is looking like it's overproofed and it's not going to spring in the oven, a trick that you can do is to pull your bread out after it's been in the oven for about 10 minutes and cut that functional score line again. Sometimes that will let steam escape a little bit longer and will get you at least some oven spring on an overproofed dough. So Michelle, if I were you, yeah, I would pull it out and bake it. Okay, so this one is going to go in my batard shaped banneton. So I'm just going to put like a nice amount of flour on top of it, make sure there's no sort of exposed sticky spots, and then I'm going to take this banneton and I'm going to put it seam side up inside the banneton. So here it is. And I like to sew up my bread. It just builds a little bit more tension. I'm kind of awkward at it, but I'll show you what I mean. So when you sew up your bread, you just kind of find a sticky spot and make it hold on to itself. And I also like to sew up and tuck in my ends. There we go. Right. There we go. Sometimes it's a good idea just to take a minute or so and go slow with your bread. You'll pan it in the long run. Okay, so now this one is going to be my boule. So same thing, I'm just going to flip the pre-shaped dough onto the counter. Again, at this stage, at the final shaping stage, we're being gentle because we just pre-shaped a whole bunch of air in there and we don't want to degas it. We don't want to force it out. But during final shaping, we also add a little bit more air. So with my boule, what I like to do is this sort of method. It gives me like a fatter one. And then with this, what I'll do is I'll actually work it where I just keep trying to tuck the edges under until I start to get a circular shape. So very gentle here, right? I'm trying not to force the air out of the bread. So here now, I'm going to lift this into my thing. And with this one, I'm going to stitch it up close so that it holds. Sometimes I find if you hold the last thing you did with your finger, it gives it a second to lock in. So now these doughs are going to go in the fridge. One will probably get baked tomorrow, and one will probably get baked on Tuesday. And while they're in the fridge, they're going to rise again. So I guess technically a second rise. Someone was asking about that on my last video. Cold proofing, like I said, is optional, but the dough continues to ferment while it's cold proofing, and it increases the taste. So I'm just going to use a shower craft for this round one. This. And then I'm going to use a produce vegetable bag for this one. Get this on. And with this, I just like to tuck it over. So now I'm just going to shove both of these in the fridge. So what I will do is I will put these in the fridge, and then I'll show you guys how to do a 10-minute score. How long have you let things sit on the counter after you pre-shape? I usually go for 30 minutes. Sometimes I go less, like I did today, because I'm doing a live and I want to be able to show you guys as many processes as I can. I forgot about it once, and it went an hour, and I found that it had like fallen too much, and so I ended up doing like more shaping during the final shaping phase. So usually the process is, okay, you know, like you look at it and you go, okay, my dough's done bulk proofing. So you're going to get your Dutch oven into the oven and start preheating it. Or if you're just using loaf pans, then you're going to start preheating your oven. And then you're going to pre-shape your Dutch oven or oven or preheating as you go, and then shape and then get it done and over with. Okay, so let me just pop these in the fridge and then I'll show you the hot score. My fridge is a little bit crowded. Have to find some room. Okay, so if you, by accident, overproof your dough, it will be extremely sticky and difficult to work with, right? That's what happens when you overproof a dough, is it just becomes unmanageable. It loses its strength and its structure, and it starts to fall. If you take overproof dough and you give it a really good pre-shape, then you might be able to save it, right? You might be able to get it to just hold tension long enough for you to get it shaped and get it into the oven. If you get it into the oven and it looks like it's falling, then there's one last thing you might be able to take to save it. Now, I'm not saying that these things will save overproof dough. If it's severely overproofed, it just is what it is. And you just try again next time, but these are good tricks to try. So my bread's been in the oven for, I don't know, how long have we been on? I don't even know, but my bread's been in for about 10 minutes now, so I'm going to pull it out and check the score. So when we look at this bread, the score, and it's hard to tip it. Let's see if I can tip the phone instead. The score is still wide open on this one, right? So it's still like moist inside and open. So this score is doing what it should be doing, right? But what happens when your dough is overproofed is as soon as you put it in the oven, it falls, right? So what you could do is pull your dough out and rescore it. So I'm just going to get this back in, first of all, and I'll try to explain what I mean. So if your dough is overproofed, it won't hold its shape and it starts to fall, right? And the idea is that we're trying to get steam to escape from the bread. But if your dough is falling so fast, if the score that you cut isn't staying open, it's fusing back together. Sometimes what will happen is it'll just lock itself back together, and then your dough will just stay flat. So if you've got overproof dough, about 10 minutes into baking, you can actually pull it out and cut that score line again, and it might be just enough to let a steam escape enough to give you a little bit of rise. Glenna, what % do I proof my dough before I put it in the fridge? So if I'm going to cold proof, I usually let my dough go to about 75% rise. If I'm going to cook on the same day without a cold proof, I'll let it rise to 100%. So a bunch of you got on, a bunch of you guys ask questions. That's really great. I just wanted to pop on and show you those two doughs just because they're really interesting. I mean, 90% of the troubleshooting that we do about bread in the group is related to cold proofing. And 90% of the troubleshooting that we do about starters is related to people just not understanding how long it takes. So every time we can share this, it's really good. And when I glanced at my dough today and saw that I had one mix that had been mixed 2 hours later than the other, but they had proofed at the same time, I thought that would be a really good way to show, why using this clear-sided containers method is a good idea. So I just wanted to come on and show you that. There's another live from this morning. So if you just go on the page, like click Sourdough for my beginners, my name, and go down to the next one, then you'll be able to sort of see the context of where this came. So thanks everyone for coming and taking a look. If there's anything you want me to cover, mention it in the comments. If you ask some questions, I'll be in a little later and I will, oh, okay. Well, I'll answer this one first. So Stella, yes, doubled. Rise 100% is doubled. Jen, hi. Wanda, and thank you. You're welcome. So I will, Stella, post the bulk proofing success video to you, or it's up in the description of this video. What we do is we put our dough into these clear-sided containers, and we mark where the dough was when we started. So you can see on this one, it was just sort of in the middle of the bowl here, and it wasn't touching the end of the bowl. On this side, it was kind of a little higher, and it was touching the end on this side. So I watched the dough and it expanded, outwards and upwards. So we're always kind of guessing, is that doubled? But yes, if you're going to bake your dough on the same day without cold proofing, let your dough double. If you're going to cold proof, stop it at about 75% because it is going to rise more in the fridge, all but much, much slower. So thanks everyone for watching, and be sure to check out the tutorials. They're all sort of broken down in all the different steps. And if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye for now.